The night was supposed to be routine. Border Patrol agent Jake Carter had spent years patrolling this unforgiving stretch of the US-Mexico border, watching over the desert, tracking movement, and stopping smugglers. But this time, he never saw them coming. The ambush was fast, brutal. Before he could react, masked men yanked him from his truck, slammed a bag over his head, and threw him into the back of a van. The tires spit gravel as they sped south, deep into cartel territory. To his captors, Carter was just another unlucky agent, a pawn in their ruthless game. They had no idea who they had just taken, no idea that before he was Border Patrol, he had spent over a decade as a Navy SEAL, surviving the world's deadliest battlefields. No idea that they hadn't captured a helpless victim, but a man trained to dismantle enemies from the inside out. Hours passed. His wrists burned from the zip ties, his body rocked with every jolt of the road. He listened, counted voices, noted accents, memorized every detail. Fear? No, he had felt worse. He had survived worse. And when the time was right, he would remind them exactly why SEALs are never easy prey. But the real question wasn't how he'd escape. It was what he'd do once he was free. Because Jake Carter wasn't just thinking about himself. He was thinking about the innocent people suffering under the cartel's grip. And he was already planning his next move. Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning. The van rattled over rough terrain, the smell of dust and sweat thick in the air. Jake Carter kept his breathing steady, his muscles tense but controlled. He could hear the men talking, 2 in the front, 3 in the back with him. Their voices were casual, even amused. To them, he was just another badge, another pawn in a dangerous game. They had no idea they were sitting inches from their worst mistake. His mind ran through every detail he had gathered. One of the men had a distinct scar along his forearm, probably a veteran in this crew. Another kept shifting uncomfortably, younger, maybe new to this life. The driver had an impatient, clipped way of speaking, like a man used to giving orders. Carter had been in enough high-risk situations to know what that meant. This wasn't a random kidnapping. This was planned. Someone had been watching him. He wasn't sure how long they had been driving when the van finally lurched to a stop. A door creaked open, and rough hands yanked him out. The bag over his head stayed in place, but the unmistakable sounds of boots on gravel, distant voices, and the hum of generators told him all he needed to know. They had taken him to a compound. The air smelled of oil and burned wood. Somewhere nearby, a radio crackled in Spanish, a mix of music and voices breaking through the static. Then a new voice spoke, calm, calculating, someone in charge. "Agent Carter," the voice said, almost amused, "you have no idea how valuable you are to us." Carter stayed silent, his mind working fast. He wasn't sure what they wanted yet. But one thing was clear: these men thought they held all the power. They were wrong. Carter kept his breathing steady as rough hands shoved him forward. He could hear the crunch of dirt beneath his boots, feel the shift in temperature as they moved from the open night air into an enclosed space. The bag over his head stayed on, but he didn't need his eyes to sense the layout. A large room, concrete floor, dim lighting. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and gasoline. The voice spoke again, still calm, still too confident. "I know you're wondering why you're here." A pause. "It's simple, really. The Border Patrol has been making things difficult for us. Routes shut down, shipments seized, men arrested. That doesn't work for us." Carter felt a hand grip his shoulder, pushing him down onto a chair. Zip ties bit into his wrists, but he ignored the sting. He wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of struggling. "And you," the man continued, "you were leverage." Leverage. That told Carter everything he needed to know. They weren't planning to kill him. Not yet. They wanted something. A trade, a message, maybe even information. That meant time. And time meant opportunity. Outside, the faint roar of an engine cut through the quiet, followed by hurried footsteps. More men, probably armed. That meant this wasn't just some small-time operation. This was a key location, a place important enough to keep secure. Carter mentally mapped the exits, listening for shifts in movement. One of the guards muttered something in Spanish, something about the boss. Footsteps approached, heavier, deliberate. Then the bag was ripped off. Bright light burned his eyes, forcing a squint. A man stood in front of him, sharply dressed, his belt lined with a holster. He studied Carter with an expression that was half amusement, half curiosity. "You're surprisingly calm," the man said, tilting his head. "Either you don't understand what kind of trouble you're in," he leaned in, "or you're more dangerous than you look." Carter held his gaze, his expression unreadable. He wasn't about to give anything away. Let them think they had control. Let them think they held the upper hand. For now. Carter sat motionless, letting the moments stretch. The man in front of him, clearly someone high up, was waiting for a reaction. When he didn't get one, his smirk faded slightly. He wasn't used to captives keeping their cool. That was good. Let them be the ones to feel uncertain. The man exhaled, nodding slightly as if coming to a decision. "You're different, I'll give you that. Most agents we catch, they break fast. They know there's no way out." He turned and gestured toward one of the guards. "But you, I think you're hiding something." Carter didn't respond. He had been trained to endure worse than this: interrogations, extreme conditions, mind games. And right now, that was exactly what this was. They wanted him to speak first, to slip up, to give them something they could use. The guard handed the man a phone. He held it up for Carter to see. On the screen was a blurry image of him in uniform, standing next to his patrol vehicle. It was recent. That meant they had been tracking him for a while. "We know who you are, Agent Carter," the man said. "We know where you live. We know the people close to you." Carter's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay composed. They were fishing, trying to gauge his weaknesses. But they had made one mistake. They thought he was just another Border Patrol agent. They had no idea who he really was. The man studied him again, then sighed. "All right, if you won't talk, we'll have to try another approach." He turned to the guards and muttered something in Spanish. Carter only caught part of it, but it was enough. Move him. Somewhere more secure. A guard grabbed Carter's arm and hauled him up. His legs were stiff from sitting, but he forced himself to move naturally. They led him down a narrow corridor, the walls lined with crates and weapons. This wasn't just a hideout. This was a supply hub, a base of operations. As they reached a metal door, Carter knew his time was running out. Once they locked him away, it would be harder to make his move. He tensed, waiting for the right moment. One chance. That's all he needed. The guards shoved Carter through the metal door, the hinges groaning as it slammed shut behind him. The room was small, dimly lit by a single overhead bulb. No windows, just a steel table, 2 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. Classic interrogation setup. They wanted him isolated, watched, controlled. Carter rolled his shoulders, testing the tension in his bindings. The zip ties were tight, but not unbreakable. He just needed the right moment. Then something unexpected happened. The door opened again, and a new figure stepped inside. She was tall, dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail, dressed in tactical gear rather than the usual cartel streetwear. She moved like a professional, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. This wasn't just another cartel enforcer. She was military, former at least. She pulled out a chair and sat across from him, folding her arms. "You've been quiet," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Most men would have asked what we want by now." Carter didn't respond. He just watched her, analyzing, waiting. She smirked slightly. "You're not like the others. And I know why." She leaned forward. "Jake Carter, former U.S. Navy SEAL, Team 6, 10 years of service, multiple classified operations. You've been in situations most people can't imagine." She was testing him now, watching for his reaction. He gave her nothing. She sighed. Look, you're not walking out of here unless we let you. But I need you to understand something. The man who runs this operation, he doesn't just want information. He wants a message sent. And if you don't cooperate, he'll make sure that message is written in blood. Still, Carter remained silent. But inside, his mind was racing. She knew who he was. That changed everything. The cartel hadn't just grabbed a Border Patrol agent by chance. They had been hunting him. But why? And more importantly, who had given them his name? Carter's heartbeat slowed, his focus sharpening. The pieces were coming together, but something still didn't add up. The cartel had been tracking him. They knew his past. But why now? Why take the risk of kidnapping a federal agent, especially one with his background? The woman leaned back, watching him. I can see the wheels turning. You're wondering why we have your file, why we know more than we should. Carter didn't answer, but she continued anyway. Let me make this easy for you. Someone on your side gave you up. Someone who wanted you out of the way. The words hit hard, but Carter kept his expression unreadable. A betrayal. That explained how they knew so much. Someone within the US government had fed his information to the cartel. But for what? Money? Power? Or was there something bigger at play? Before he could push further, the door burst open. One of the guards rushed in, speaking rapidly in Spanish. Carter caught enough to understand. Something had gone wrong. There was movement outside. Someone was coming. The woman tensed, glancing at the guard before standing. Stay here. She shot him one last look before walking out, the door locking behind her. This was it, his window. Carter exhaled, bracing himself. He twisted his wrists, feeling the edge of the zip tie dig in. With a sharp motion, he snapped the plastic, ignoring the sting. Moving fast, he scanned the room. Nothing useful. But the overhead camera, that was an opening. He reached up, yanking the wires loose. The screen outside would go dark. They'd come check, and when they did, he'd be ready. Seconds passed. Footsteps approached. The lock clicked. As the door opened, Carter moved. In an instant, he was on the first guard, driving an elbow into his throat. The man crumpled. Carter grabbed his weapon, turning just as the second guard lunged. A quick sidestep, a sharp strike, and the second man went down just as fast. He barely had time to process what was happening when gunfire erupted outside. Shouts, chaos. Someone was attacking the compound. Carter grabbed a radio off one of the guards and listened. A single word repeated through the static. Ghost. The call sign sent a chill down his spine. That wasn't cartel. That was military. Someone else had been hunting him, and now they had arrived. The real question was, were they here to rescue him? Or to silence him for good? Carter pressed himself against the wall, gripping the stolen weapon as the firefight outside intensified. Shadows flickered past the doorway, shouts echoing through the compound. He didn't know who Ghost was, but one thing was clear. Whoever they weren't leaving survivors. He needed to move, fast. Slipping into the hallway, he kept low, scanning for an exit. Bodies of cartel guards littered the ground, some still clutching weapons they hadn't had time to fire. Whoever had attacked had done so with precision. This wasn't just a raid, it was a message. As he reached the main yard, he saw them, figures in dark tactical gear moving through the compound, their movements sharp, practiced, special forces. But not US, they were too quiet, too methodical. Mercenaries. One of them spotted him and raised a rifle. Carter didn't hesitate. He ducked, rolling behind cover just as bullets tore through the air. His instincts kicked in, engage or escape. He had no backup, no guarantee of who these men were working for. Then, a familiar voice crackled over the stolen radio. Agent Carter, stand down. He froze. The woman from before, the one who had interrogated him. She stepped into view, lowering her weapon. It's over, she said, her voice steady. You were never the target. The cartel was. Carter stared at her, piecing it together. The kidnapping, the betrayal, the sudden attack, it wasn't about him. It was about wiping out the cartel leadership. He had just been caught in the middle. She tossed him a set of keys. "Truck's outside. You should go." Carter hesitated. He wanted answers. But right now, the smartest move was walking away. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the night.